which keepeth thee. He will not slumber nor sleep. Oh, the Lord is thy keeper, the Lord is thy shade upon thy right hand, upon thy right hand. No, the sun shall not smite thee by day, nor the moon by night. He shall preserve thy soul, even forevermore. My help, my help, my help. All of my help cometh from the Lord. I will lift up mine eyes to the hills, from whence cometh my help. My help cometh from the Lord which made heaven and earth. He said, He will not suffer thy foot to be moved. The Lord which keepeth thee, He will not slumber nor sleep. Oh, the Lord is thy keeper, the Lord is thy shade upon thy right hand, upon thy right hand. No, the sun shall not smite thee by day, nor the moon by night. He shall preserve thy soul, even forevermore. My help, my help, my help. All of my help cometh from the Lord. My help, my help. All of my help cometh from the Lord. All of my help cometh from the Lord. I lift mine eyes unto the hills. All of my help cometh from the Lord. I lift mine eyes unto the hills. All of my help cometh from the Lord. Amen.
Come on, you got to say amen again. It's very important to know where our help come from, and that our help comes from God. Sean, Brother Sean? Joshua, Bible name, Joshua. We appreciate you really blessing our hearts with that special rendition. Come on, you got to show him some love. You know, when our young adults are using up their gifts and talents in the service of the Lord, they could be using it elsewhere. Or they're in church using it up for the Lord. It's something we need to affirm, celebrate, and appreciate. Thank you again, Joshua, for your ministry in music. Thank you also to the younger ones. Good to see that you have them engaged in AY. Children are the future. Teach them well and let them lead the way. Show them all the beauty they possess inside. And let me express my appreciation again to Sister Nicole, as well as the Health Ministries Department, for inviting us. Our time here has been wonderful. And this afternoon, I know you went on a health march, and I'm sure you have left an eternal impression and impact to those that you ministered to. For this afternoon, we're going to look at, they're going to share the presentation on the screen, right? So this afternoon, we are going to look at how depression is manifested in black and brown communities. As was said, remind me of your name again, my sis. Sister Wint. As was said by Sister Wint, you have gotten enough about who I am this morning in the introduction. And so before we dive in, I am going to give my wife an opportunity just to introduce herself and her expertise in this area.
So happy Sabbath, everyone. Happy Sabbath, everyone. Just to give you a little bit of background about me. So I'm Shelly Ann. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and PhD candidate. Pray for me. I'm supposed to be defending my dissertation this upcoming quarter. I have been in the field for about, I would say, over 15 years. I have worked in a wide range of areas in clinical social work. I've been in forensics, inpatient, outpatient, domestic violence, you name it. I've also worked in, I'm not sure if you guys know, you watch movies and they talk about the SHU. But you know what the SHU is? So the SHU is the special housing unit for like inmates who are on suicide watch. So I've worked with that. My specialty as well is the suicide population. That is also what I'm looking at in my dissertation.
Amen. Come on, you got to say amen. Amen. So my wife comes to this field with far more experience than I do. And so if you see me differing to most of your questions and comments to her, is because she's far more proficient in this area. But we want to basically begin by getting your engagement. So please feel free If you have any questions or comments as we go along, one of the things we want to ask you, the question is on the screen. My wife will read that.
Okay, so what percentage of African Americans seek mental health treatment compared to our white counterparts? So when you think, what's the number of black? Huh?
You have to talk.
75%?
75, okay.
I hear 5%.
5. 25. 25, 75. Okay. All right. Let's put it up on the screen and see what the answer is.
All right. So black people are far less likely to seek mental health care. And the statistics tells us that only 39% of African Americans seek mental health treatment compared to 50% white.
All right. So as you see, the Caucasians are ahead of us by about 11%, right? And what we are attempting to do, we want to provide adequate education, right? So people in our communities can start feel not the stigma can be taken away, where they realize they need to capitalize on seeking help when help is needed. So one of the things that we are doing to actually close this gap and also to increase, even to go beyond the 39% and eventually the 50% to a larger percentage is, as you have heard, we have opened our own mental health practice. It's a virtual health practice that covers the entire state of New York. And most of the clients that we see are black and brown clients. I would say 95% of the clients that we see are black and brown clients. We do have some Caucasians. We do have some Asians as well. And by the way, conservatively, we see our practice sees about 600 clients per week. That's a conservative number. Because on staff, we have about, say, 40 clinicians, almost 40. 44. Huh? 44. There you go. So on staff, we have 44 clinicians. And we see on a weekly basis with those 44 clinicians about 600 clients per week. And most of our clinicians are African Americans, blacks, Hispanics. We do have, a small percentage of white clinicians that we hire. But why we have such a huge population in terms of black and brown clients who come to us for therapy, because they recognize that the practice is black owned. And so it pulls them towards our practice. So this is one of the ways how we are engaging and creating an interest in our people to engage in therapy, okay?
All right. So what percentage do you think of counseling professionals are black when compared to white professionals? Similar to what? 30% black to 25, 27%. All right. Want to know that 82% are white, black or African American, 15%. Hispanics, you see, is 11%, and Asian, 1%. And this is coming from the American Counseling Association, 2024. So you see that it is pretty recent statistics that we're given. The reason why we're bringing this to your attention, when we show you what the percentage of professionals who are black, because one of the things that we found is that, and I'm pretty sure some of you have experienced it here, there's a lot of misunderstanding in mental health when it comes to black people. For example, I think it was 2 years ago, it was on the news where the black woman was in the emergency room doing this. Any of you guys saw that one? So she was kind of doing this, and they put her in the psychiatric ward because they thought she was actually hurting herself, but she was actually scratching her head because she had a wig on. So it makes a difference when someone of color is coming to see a professional that is black, because there is a different level of understanding that they're going to experience. Not to say that our white counterparts cannot, but it requires a certain level of understanding and training.
Right, and just another point here, one of the ways that we are trying to help our population, we have started a black-owned practice to connect with our people. Secondly, we are also developing black and brown clinicians, because as you'll see there, notice the percentage. 82% are mainly white clinicians, and just 15% black clinicians. So one of the things we do in our practice, we are developing clinicians to actually increase the amount of black and Hispanic clinicians that we can put out there to meet the growing need for therapy among our people. Are you with me so far? So one of the ways how we do this is we take on interns. We have Adventist interns. They would go and do social work degree or mental health counseling, and somehow they get connected to us because they have to do internship in order to finish their education. And this is where we would help them to get that internship experience so that they can finish their education and go out in the world to provide therapy. Does that make sense, everybody? It's not easy work developing interns, but it is important work because we want to develop more clinicians. Another thing that we do, coming to you, is that there are some individuals who will graduate with a mental health degree or a social work degree, and they will go into different jobs that don't require a license. So there are times when they come to us and they do not have a license. Now in New York, you have to have a license to practice therapy. So my wife is a licensed clinical social worker. I am a licensed clinical social worker. And so the state authorizes us on their behalf to apply for what is called a limited license. For social work, this limited license is only valid for a year. And so when they acquire this limited license, they are able to do therapy for a year. Within that year, within that year, we encourage them to make sure they take the state exam. Because after the year is expired, if they don't take the state exam, it's not going to be renewable. On the other side, for the mental health counselors, they can practice on a limited license for quite a bit of years, acquiring their clinical hours to sit their clinical exam so they can fully practice. So we have been helping a number of our people to be able to get to acquire the limited license, to give therapy, but at the same time to sit the state exam to become fully licensed professionals. Does that make sense, everybody?
And
all right.
just to add to that, why it's so important, they have to receive, because you might graduate with your master's degree in the profession, but you also require certain type of supervision to provide therapy. So it's different from like case management or just graduating and say, hey, I work in social services. Very different. Okay? So that's why it's important for them to receive supervision. And like for social work, we have to do 3 full years, and there's no way around it.
And by the way, there is a Seventh-day Adventist young lady. We are pretty close. She tried to pass that exam for years. Every time she attempted the exam, she might fail by 2 points. She might fail by 10 points. When we started the practice, she was one of the first employees we had with the limited license. And that young lady went and she started to get the practical experience of therapy. And when she went to the exam, she was able to finally pass that exam. And right now she's accumulating her hours towards her clinical license, which we have all the confidence that she is going to pass, right? And sometimes she serves as a blessing. Why? Because there are some cases where Seventh-day Adventists will come to us and they want that denominational connectivity along with the clinical piece. And there are times when she has been, there are times when we connect the clients to her, and the feedback is it's a tremendous blessing for them, all right? So what we are trying to say here is we have to think of ways in the mental health space how we are going to, and you're going to see why this is important, why we are stressing this, why we need clinicians to connect with our community when it comes to the clinical engagement. All right? All right. I know somebody had their hand up. Go ahead, and then over here. No, man, she's an Adventist. Yeah. Yeah, we have Adventist clinicians, we have non-Adventist clinicians. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Okay, let's look on the screen here, and what we're trying to say, the burden of our presentation, we are trying to help you to understand that when depression is not manifested the same in every community and in every cultural group, and understanding how depression is manifested among black and brown people is going to be important for clinical treatment. Does that make sense? All right.
And the reason that is, when there's no understanding of how depression shows up in the black and brown community, oftentimes what happens is that it's underdiagnosed or it's misdiagnosed, or sometimes it's spiritualized. Other times we find that it's criminalized. So what's the importance of it being diagnosed? And I know in the black community, we don't want to be diagnosed because we have the belief that if we are diagnosed, we are going to lose out on a lot of things, and that's not true. But it is important because if you are not diagnosed, just like in the medical field, let's say you had diabetes, and the doctor diagnosed you with something else, or didn't catch the diabetes, what's going to happen? It's going to get worse. And if it's misdiagnosed, what we find is that you're being treated for something else and you're not getting the correct treatment. Therefore, the person is not going to get better, right? Or when it's misdiagnosed, it could go into the criminalizing part of it. Let's say you have, and a lot of kids experience this, especially black boys. Let's say you have a kid who is at school and, their depression is showing up more behavioral. Instead of that, if they diagnose this child with depression, what is going to happen is that they're going to go, a certain line of treatment is going to happen. They're going to direct the child to, a therapist, and the way in which they approach that child is going to look different. However, if the child is misdiagnosed with like a ODD or a positional defiant disorder, that is straight line to go into more juvenile detention. For example, it's eventually as they get older, you're going to see them say, hey, this kid have a conduct disorder. And it's treated differently, so that kid kind of direct into more behavioral programs, and is treated differently in school.
All right. Is that clear, saints? I think, my sister, you had a hand up. Did I miss your hand? Okay, my apologies. It's just, it escaped me earlier, but I just remember that you had your hand up. So, saints, what we want to make sure is that the people of God don't believe it's a compromise of their spirituality. If you are going through a difficult time, or if you feel depressed, it's not a letdown of your faith if you go and seek professional help. Didn't Jesus say, he that is sick, let him seek a what? A physician. Sometimes we only think about it in the context of a doctor, but it also has to do with other healthcare professionals as well. So what we find is that there is a sensitive balance where people can be going through a difficult time and they spiritualize it away. So depression can be spiritualized away. And that is not going to get you the help that you need. While you are praying, while you are serving, you can also seek support. Does that make sense, ladies and gentlemen? I see your hand. I can tell you most of the people that we see, over 600 clients a week, most of them are non-Adventist Christians. A lot of them. And they are coming. They are doctors. They are nurses. They are lawyers. Why? Because they are seeking a professional place, a confidential place, a safe place to work through some things. Right. Yes. So, I'm going through a spiritual attack. This is just the devil, okay? That sometimes can be true, but then there are times when it is sustained, where you might say, hey, I'm not going to give up praying. By the way, we were in one church, and the health ministries leader that invited us, she basically shared her testimony about a traumatic encounter that she had and how she had to seek for a therapist. And you know what her point was? Every Sabbath I was in church. Every Sabbath I was doing my work, while at the same time seeking professional help. And she explained that that professional help actually helped her through that difficult time. Does that make sense, everybody? All right. So, criminalize. I see a hand here. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's the very thing that we are providing education on. Not only for the individual, not to use the spiritual framing to mask the challenges that they are going through, but the believers have to be careful regarding comments that you make when people are going. So if you see somebody not showing, if you see somebody isolating, well, you want to go now and beat them further down. That's your opportunity to get them the support and the help that they need. Does that make sense, everybody? I'm coming to you. Let me say this. There was a person very close to me in my teenage years, right? And she wanted to come to America to get a better life. And somehow it didn't work out when she came, and she had a mental break. And she was saying all kind of stuff, carried just like what some of the things that you described there. And at the time, people were saying could be demon possession, all kind of stuff, right? We made a decision. I can remember as young as I was involved to restrain her because we didn't know better. Nobody's going to. She's not going to volunteer herself to go. But we made a decision to restrain her and take her. If you're from Jamaica, you'd hear about Bellevue. Anybody know about Bellevue? So that's where we took her to Bellevue. And they gave her the medication. And when I went to look for her, it was a completely different individual. Couldn't believe it. She got around, started to do better, started to working, and she said she's going to try the natural stuff. Okay? And after she came off the medication and tried the natural stuff, the illness came back. So we had to have a conversation with her to say, listen, it seems as if the body has been damaged to a point where you're going to need the medication. We're not saying don't incorporate the natural things, but also you got to have to use the medication. And she came back around. That person eventually came to the state. She has a full-time job. She is a citizen, and she's doing phenomenally well. Let me tell you, if she didn't get that help that she needed at that time, if it was only seen as demon possession, and because it's demon possession, you need to die out there. that person would have wasted away and died. But that intervention made a difference in her life. So while you're praying for the demons to come out, make sure you're getting people the support that they need. Does that make sense, saints? All right. Somebody had a hand out there. Right. Right.
Also, while I hear what you're saying, but remember, when a person is struggling with depression, sometimes it goes against the very grain of wanting to accept the help. So, it goes that we also still have to try a little harder. We have to do a little bit more because sometimes they aren't able to do the legwork that needs to happen in order for them to get the help, right? I'm gonna comment to the sister here point. When it comes to spiritualizing mental health in a church, share a personal experience. My sister passed away in 2005. She had a host of difficult things happen to her. She lost a baby. She right after losing the baby, she found out her husband was cheating on her. Actually, she witnessed it. We didn't know. I was young. It was my first year of college, so I was 16, turning 17. And my sister came to my mother's house and she was crying. This is Jamaica. Nobody's thinking about, oh, she needs to get some mental health care. But I was going to my first year at NCU studying psychology, and all buoyed up and telling my parents about, hey, get her some help. She needs to see somebody. My sister was going to church every single day. She was praying every single day. I don't think any of us here prayed more than she did, right? But she died. You know why? She found out she had cancer. She told nobody. It was not about the cancer. She was depressed. And no matter how much she prayed, that was not going to help. And I know you guys want to stone me, but just think about it where if any of us diagnosed with diabetes or cancer and we stand here and we say we're going to pray and we're just going to pray and God is going to heal me and I'm not going to see any doctor, what happens? All of you would tell me I'm crazy to do that, right? And it's the same thing with mental health. If you are struggling, the person just needs help. If my family had the knowledge that I have and I'd kind of push, like in Deebo's case, and took my sister, we would have found out that she had cancer because she told nobody. She wanted to die. You lost your child. You saw your husband cheating. She had no will to live. The depression took her out faster than the cancer.
All right, saying so what we're saying, we're not saying blame individuals. The church is supposed to be blamed for individual struggle. That's not what we are saying. But what I think the sister was also saying is that there were some comments made to the individual in their illness about you should get yourself together or you're letting yourself go. I don't want to get in that controversy. Okay. Yeah. Sure. And then later, yeah, that's
Yeah.
good that you got the support from the church community because that's important because therapy is a collaborative work. It's not just the therapist that you see, but you're going to notice the therapist is going to be exploring what other support system that you have. And there are times when family comes into play, and then there's another dimension where the church community comes into play. So once what the sister is pressing home is that you have developed a culture here at Brooklyn Faith that when somebody is going through a difficult time, the brethren seem to rally around and give intentional support. So anybody going through struggle, that's good to know that that support resides here. All right, let's press on. All right. So depression is rarely openly discussed in our communities, yet the suffering is profoundly real, and the gap between the lived experience and the clinical recognition is not a matter of biology. It is a product of systematic neglect, cultural misunderstanding, as well as historical wounds. All right? Let me also share with you that the data on depression in Black and Hispanic, go forward. The data on depression in Black and Hispanic communities reveals a troubling paradox. You have the lower rates of diagnosed depression exist alongside higher rates of chronic, severe, and debilitating forms of the illness. So what we are trying to say is that there is a cultural way how Black people, brown people, express that they are depressed. They might not use the clinical language like depression or feeling severely overwhelmed. They might not use that clinical language, but they might use certain cultural expressions that we are going to show in a little while. And these cultural expressions are good indicators that they are replacing the word depression with these cultural expressions. Now, if a clinician is not culturally aware of these expressions, what we often find is that that clinician might not be effective in treating or diagnosing or recognizing that the person before them is actually going through depression. So yes, it is misdiagnosed. Yes, it is underdiagnosed. And by the time it is really labeled as diagnosis, guess what happened? As depression, guess what happened? It now becomes what? Very chronic, very severe, and debilitating. Why? Because sometimes it has been misdiagnosed because it's missed by the clinician and the person is there being treated for something else. And another time, it might be that the person wait too long to go and seek help. Does that make sense? You have to talk back to me in a sense. We want to make sure. Does that make sense? Amen. 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 All right. My wife will take you through this.
Despite the fact that a lot of Black and brown people don't seek mental health care like our white counterparts, it is a major issue in our community. For example, the suicide rates have greatly increased among Black youths in the past 20 years. 2014 study found that 49% of Black women who went to see their primary care physician had symptoms of depression. And this is something every primary care physician does. So this is a huge number. when you go to see your PCP, they usually give you a little form for anxiety and depression. So that's going based on that. So because they are checking for depression and anxiety, that 49% is very high. Then 10% of that 49% experience suicidal thoughts. One of the things that came home to me as I was doing my research for my dissertation, I looked at fathers who had kids, adolescent kids who was experiencing self-harm. And so I had to go through a lot of the data regarding suicide and all that. And I found majority of the research was showing us that they found that 1 in 3 persons experience suicidal thoughts. So if 3 of us are standing here, 1 of us have had thoughts about suicide. Right? So when it comes to black high schoolers, reports for suicidal thoughts are at 9.8% compared to 6.1% of white students. Right? But it gets even worse. Suicide rate declined among white teens from 1991 to 2017, but it rose 73% in the same period for black teens. That is huge, right? Let me pause there to say, in our black community, a lot of times our kids are going through things, and, one of the things that parents say is, what do you have to be sad about? Anybody ever heard that? Yeah. So a family had reached out to us about their kid, their child, and I assessed the young lady, teenager, and severely depressed. This child had a lot of, when I tell you, cuts all over her body. And because she also had keloid skin, the previous wounds were very pronounced, and she had fresh cuts. In my assessment with her, I discovered that she had attempted suicide 3 times. Of course, I brought the parents into that conversation, and they could verify twice. They did not know that that's what she did, but because of the profession that the mother is in, she knew what happened, and she kind of, gave her some charcoal based on how the child was presenting. But even though she knew this child never saw a therapist, she never took her to an emergency room. Nothing happened with this child. And I was not seeing the child professionally. We knew them, so I could not professionally see the kid. I was doing a favor. And my recommendation to the family was that she needs to see a therapist, and the child in particular needs to see a psychiatrist. I also gave them some other advice. I said, take up all your medication, because the child had gone after the parent, try to harm the parent, and that's why they reached out. I said, take up all the medication. She should not have access to even over-the-counter medication. So I was kind of talking to this kid while they are supposed to be finding someone for the child. So the next time when I saw the child, she was telling me about medication, and I said, yeah, but who's giving you the medication? She showed me the bottle. This is a child who took medication 3 separate occasions to kill herself, and the parents still allowed her to have the medication. The parents never sought any help. Of course, I couldn't continue because I'm not seeing them professionally, and this is my recommendation. To this day, I don't even think they have found someone, because they're this belief, and of course, they are Christians. They're of the belief that it must be demon possession. But I'm telling you, I have worked with teenagers. This is a classic bipolar type depression. And if they do not do anything, the child might eventually kill herself. It might eventually happen, And I think a lot in our community, in our black and brown community, this happens a lot. to preserve sometimes our own, especially in the church, our own, what's the word am I looking? Image. We don't want to take the child to get the help that they need. We'll pray about it, but we don't get the help that the child really does need to get better. Let me take the lady in the green, and then I'll come to you. Yeah. Yeah. Can you get a mic there? Give me 1 second.
Can we get a roving mic just to get the comments and yeah.
It's not turned on. Okay.
Son, go ahead, speak now.
No, barely.
Okay, what I'm saying, take for example, I have a child, and I bring the child to the doctor, the clinician, and the child is misdiagnosed. However, I have the same clinician over the years because I'm thinking that whatever medication they're giving, it's working. How would I know that the child was misdiagnosed if I'm going to the same clinician all the time?
So, let me see if I understand you. So you have the clinician and the prescriber, two different people, right? Um, hopefully they're communicating. How you're saying, how would you know if the clinician misdiagnosed? So therapy and medication management goes hand in hand with depression. And some people have there are different types of depression. Let me just clarify that. If you have a person with like a bipolar type depression, what's going to happen? That person may need medication for the rest of their life, to be honest with you. Um, because there are some risky things that come with that. They have a lot of suicidality attached to it. They might also, you might find that person engage in they will go off and like they will just have sex with a bunch of people, and you're wondering why this person is promiscuous. Getting off the medication, they might go into a manic stage, and that's what they're trying to prevent. And then you will see them fall into the depression. They really don't like the normal. Those people don't like medication either because they don't like to feel normal. They like the manic stage. But those people usually can't really just get off their medication like that. We're talking about regular depression, not the bipolar ones. So we have to figure out what that person actually has, what they're treating, the psychiatrist treating with the medication to even determine whether the person can get off the medication.
Yeah, and then that if it's a child, you have to have conversation with the therapist, right? This is a diagnosis. Then you have to have a conversation with the prescriber. This has been happening for years, not seeing any improvement. We need to. So whoever is a guardian or the parent, has to be involved in the process of treatment. Because if I'm not seeing any improvement, then I will have to have some kind of conversation. Does that make sense? All right. Okay.
And also with medication, if you have your child and the child is getting medication and there's no improvement, Hopefully, you're having your therapist and the whether the psych NP, psychiatrist, they're communicating, because typically the person who's prescribing the medication, they see if you're being prescribed the medication by a psych NP or a psychiatric or a psychiatrist, they're seeing the person maybe once a month, right? So not very often, and sometimes it's 15 minutes, as opposed to your therapist who is seeing the client every single week for at least an hour. That's a big difference. So those two people should be talking to each other to ensure they're coordinating care, to make sure that, because if there's no improvement, the therapist should be reaching out to the psychiatrist and they're kind of having some discussion to say, hey, we're not seeing any treatment progress here. This is what I'm seeing with the child, and then maybe medication. Maybe the child don't even need the medication. Maybe it's just therapy. And that's something, or maybe it's a situation where they're on the medication and they're gradually tapering the child off. Would never recommend, if they have the kid on a medication, don't just take that. Don't take anybody off the medication, psych medication, just like that. Always work with them to get them off.
My sister, you had a comment or a question? Huh?
What level of education the parent of a dependent child, how successful, if the person is more educated or less educated, would they seek help? Are
Well,
less educated people less
whether
likely
you,
to seek help?
sure,
Or
sure, whether you're educated or uneducated, if you notice that something is off, if you notice that something is off, it's important to make yourself available to assist whoever is before you seeking treatment.
yeah, but we were talking at least briefly about spiritualization.
Sure, 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 sure.
Not finished.
No, go ahead, sorry.
No, because I'm thinking that the less educated person would more likely to spiritualize behavior that is actually treatable with medicine and counseling, as opposed to one with more education who would be able to observe certain types of behavior that know that this is not something that is spiritual, if you want to call it that.
And I don't know the data on it, but I don't think it affects it as much. I think if people recognize that they need help, they'll go for help. I think, from my experience, the more educated people have a harder time seeking help. Have a harder time. They do come, but they have a harder time because you're thinking about, especially before telehealth was a thing. You're talking about, as the professional, walking into an office, sitting down, and maybe finding 10 other people seeing you. For example, I remember I went to a ministerial wives, we had a yearly meeting that we would go to. And I remember a pastor's wife talking about her own mental health. And she left New York State to another state. And she's a professional to get mental health because she was so scared to go into a mental health facility here to get help. So the stigma is big, and for professional people, it is hard because they're also interacting with other professionals as well.
Sure, sure. And
Before you go on,
yes,
sorry, before you go on, as we said, there is a certain stigma that goes with mental health, and there is lots of different faces to mental health. Depression is just one of them.
Sure.
Over the past 3 weeks, I had the opportunity to meet a little boy. He's 11 years old. I met him on my job, and I was doing a one-to-one with him because they said he stopped eating. Now, the mother and the father was using threats to him. Why are you not eating? If you don't eat, I'm going to beat you, blah, 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 blah. So they didn't know that he was not eating at school. So one day when I was sitting with him, I said to him, I said, why are you in the hospital? He said, oh, because I'm not eating. I said, well, why don't you eat? And then he started talking to me. He told me that he was being bullied at school. He told me that the other kids was calling him fat. He's on the spectrum, so they was making fun of him. And his mom was sitting there, and she looked at me. After she walked out of the room, she told me, half of the things that he told me, she didn't know anything about it. She did not know. So they was using threats to this 11-year-old kid, trying to get him to eat, not knowing what the problem was, because there was something that was causing him to not eat. An 11-year-old child don't just stay so and stop eating. They did not bring him to get help. They did not find out more than he was supposed to eat, and that was all there is to it. So we as adults, and sometimes we don't even see it, sometimes it's a person away from the situation that notices something is wrong and this is not normal. And again, because I don't want my child to be stigmatized that he has a mental health situation going on here, we tend to look the other way and, use other languages, and we don't get any help.
That's spot on. And as a matter of fact, when we come to the case study, I don't want you to forget what you share, because we have a case study that we are going to come to, and you're going to see that this case study is relatable to what you just shared, right? So that is why providing, and you're going to see later down where we are stressing that from a conference level, we are hoping more churches, more pastors, more health leaders start to have ongoing conversation, providing empowerment and education regarding mental health. As you say, they see the child not eating. In their mind, they are trying to grapple with why not eating. Okay, the best thing to do is to beat him into eating, when that is not the solution. Okay? Notice you pull him aside, you started to explore what's going on, then you recognize the non-eating is a symptom of him being bullied. Does that make sense? And that is why this kind of education is so important. Why that is important, when I was 16 years old, I used to go to Glenmuir High School. My parents, my mother, I was close to her, but she couldn't, financially she couldn't sustain me in that high school. And so I had to go and live with my dad. Now my dad was out of the picture. We didn't have that good relationship. He had a rule: if you come in 1 minute past 3 p.m., you can't come into his house. Now you're talking about a high school student preparing for CXC, has labs. I couldn't do any of those things. I remember one day I came 1 minute late, and the man was literally sitting on the veranda telling me I can't come in. It so happened that one day I found myself sleeping from night till morning, from morning. I'm saying, what's going on? I couldn't name it. It so happened that the Holy Spirit, that's why for me, nobody can convince me that God doesn't exist. Because literally I heard somebody says, get up and go to your aunt's house to live. My father didn't even know when I got dressed and left his house, right? And that was where my sleeping changed. You know what, now that I am in this field, when I look back on that experience, I recognize as a young man I was severely depressed. Because I could sleep right throughout the night and right throughout the day and still feel tired. But you see, a parent who is uneducated to know what was going on, are misinformed and or not empowered, you know what they would say back then? Boy lazy. Boy lazy. But listen, I was going to one of the top high schools in Jamaica, Glenmuir High School, so that couldn't be laziness. You see? So what I'm trying to say is, ladies and gentlemen, very important that when our children come to us to seek help, all right, we don't turn them away, but we have that important conversation with them so that they can get the necessary help that they need. And let me tell you this. One of the things that I've been a pastor now for quite some time. So I tell people the perfunctory and the performance can become a barrier for us seeking help, as opposed to, so those things don't really move me as a pastor. What really moves me is when we are very transparent. Let me tell you what happened. We have seen where 21, 22, 25-year-old coming to us for therapy. And as a matter of fact, why sometimes I draw them is because I'm a male. So they're really looking for a black male. Sometimes they read my profile and they realize I'm a religious person and they will come to talk with me. Sometimes, you know what we are realizing? They are suffering from erectile dysfunction at such a young age. Why? Go to the doctor. Doctor says, listen, I can't find anything medical that is contributing to this. It has to be mental. Guess what happened? One of the main culprits that is contributing to that would be their addiction to pornography. And when their addiction to pornography, why? Because they are in this world where they are looking at this erratic, raw stuff. And so when they come back to the natural world, they have no kind of interest or appetite. I'm talking about not just non-Christians, I'm talking about Christians. And I'm not only knocking the young, I'm not only saying it's young adults alone. Right now I have a 70-year-old gentleman who has been struggling with porn for years, and in his Sunday church, he is a part of the prayer band. Why? Because he got, you know where he picked up that pornography from? The parents put down, back in the days, the magazines. It's not the internet now, but the magazines. That's where he picked it up from a very early age. So when he's anxious, when he's depressed, guess what he turned to? He turned to porn as a way of coping. And when you provide this education in the church, you know what some people try to tell you? Oh, this is too raw for an Adventist church. But the experiences are real. The experiences are real. So if you want to help people, you got to have what? Real, honest conversation. Does that make sense? All right. I see a hand. And denial can be a contributing factor as well. All right, let's press on here.
All right, so just to sum up, Black and Hispanic adults are 50% less likely to receive care. When they're diagnosed with depression, it's 3 times more chronic, and the dropout rate is very early. So patients in these communities, they do not complete treatment. And some of the factors that relates to that, again, they're meeting with someone that they think don't really understand them. They have to explain every single thing before the person understands what they're talking about. Because there are cultural nuances in the black community that other races really don't get unless you explain it to them. Even, I always say not every black is black. For example, I have a couple that I work with, and these are intelligent people. The wife is a criminal attorney, brilliant woman. And the husband, he's a Wall Street guy. you know, these are brilliant people. Um, and they, for example, went before seeing me, they had gone to, I think she said they had 3 other therapists before. And, one of the therapists that they saw actually told her to leave her husband. And I'm telling you, it's just a wonderful couple. When she found me, the husband is Jamaican, the wife is Black American. They are very culturally different. These people were going through a lot of difficulties, not just because, a lot of it is cultural. And I'm Jamaican, so I can say, we particular. And so, as I worked with them, and I'm helping them with the cultural piece of it, I could understand the cultural nuances that were going on to kind of point that out for them. She was experiencing a lot of depression and anxiety because of the marriage, what was going on in the marriage. The husband, he looked as if he wasn't experiencing the depression, but he was experiencing depression. And it was driving him away from the wife. What he would do, instead of come home and there's an engagement with the wife, he goes to the basement, and you know what he does? He just masturbates. And then he showers and go to bed. And that just is a repeat of the depression. And so then you have this angry wife over here, and it's very shameful for anybody who, and we don't have a lot of men here, but the Jamaican men, that's very shameful. There's a lot of shame that's around that. And then the wife turns to him and says, "You must be gay." That's why he's not sleeping with her. But there's a lot of, but I was able to kind of understand some of those cultural nuances, helping them to kind of break that down. I remember the first time when they came to me, and, we worked for the first session, and normally it's an hour, but there was so much that they came in with, and I gave them an extra half an hour. And the husband, who the wife had said, well, he was not going to talk to me because, of course, he was never going back to therapy after the other therapist had told her to leave him. He had come in, and after the first session, he said, "Shelly-Ann, 1 hour is not going to work. Can I pay you for 2 hours?" Today, I still see them for 2 hours. Every time I'm trying to get them back down to 1, they're like, no. So I still see them for 2 hours. And then they're doing amazing. For a man a Jamaican man who thought he's never going back to therapy, and he's in therapy, and their marriage is doing, she's pregnant now. Should give you some indication.
Sure. And that's important to point out. That's where the cultural connectivity comes in, ladies and gentlemen. It's very, very important, because even with some of the white clinicians, that we hire, there was one white clinician that we hired, and that man gave me anxiety because I was so apprehensive in placing black clients with him, simply because I felt that they would not have received the quality care that I wanted them to receive. So you know what we had to do? We had to actually create for him his own profile so he could pull his own people. One of the things we do, we also support the educational pursuit of young children and young adults who are struggling academically. So there was this young guy, he's in college in the city, and he came to me, He says to me, when I have to take test for 45 minutes, I get so anxious and I fail. So he says, Mr. Brown, is there anything that you can do to assist me? So I said to him, no worries. I can give you a clinical letter for your school to get test accommodation. And so he got the letter. Now, I assigned him to this Caucasian gentleman. Got the letter. I talked to him. I say, listen, I do not only want to provide you with the letter and then you disappear. No, I want you to still come back because we want to help you also to work through your anxiety. So if this ever comes up again, you can say, this is how I am meeting weekly in sessions to develop coping skills to deal with my anxiety. He says, agreed. He says, agreed. The Sunday before this Sunday, I met with him because I had to take. We had to eventually let the Caucasian man go because we didn't like how he was approaching the clients. So we had to let him go. When I reassigned that young man to me, I said to him, so help me to understand how things are going. He says they gave him, instead of 45 minutes, they gave him now an hour and 45 minutes based on the letter that we got. He says, my grades have moved from B now to A. Tomorrow I'm going to see him just to find out how his other final exams go. But he was very optimistic that things are going in the right direction. Now, when that gentleman, the guy texted me and he says, listen, I'm in church, because he goes to Sunday church. I'm going to be 5 minutes late. You know the assumption in the clinician head? Oh, because you gave him the letter, he's not going to come back. So what I had to do was to copy the message that the guy sent me and sent it to him to let him know. You cannot have those pre-assumptions and judgments, because then you won't make yourself available to do effective treatment with. All right? Let me say, if you don't be there to care for your own, and we don't get more of our people out there in the field, sometimes your young adult, your children who are seeking clinical diagnosis or letters that can help them to do better, they might never get it because the person who they go to see might be looking at them differently. Does that make sense, ladies and gentlemen? All right. So that is why we are saying here that it is important to understand the cultural delivery of therapy. All right, let's move on. Go, Rita.
All right, so understanding the unique ways depression manifests within the Black community is foundational for providing effective care. And so when I'm fine means anything but fine. So direct disclosure of depression is rare. It's rare when a Black person walks in and says, oh, I'm depressed. Instead, we have to listen for like coded languages, right? That signals like deep, deep distress beneath the surface. And these phrases carry weight of suffering that has no clinical name to it, right? And it happens in our everyday conversation, but if you look in what we call the diagnostic manual, it cannot be found. So sometimes you might hear this sense of, I'm tired, I'm stressed. And we're not saying every time someone say, I'm tired or I'm stressed, that they're depressed. But there is this deep sense of overwhelm that you're hearing along with it. You will also hear them constantly say they're going through it, right? I just need to pray more. I can't be weak. I'm not built for therapy. And a lot of times when they come in, they start with this: I'm not built for therapy. And they go on. So what?
So before my wife moves to the other slide, have you in any of that expression, do you hear I am depressed? No. But what they are using, they are using their cultural expression that might be indicating depression without using the actual clinical term. Where other cultural groups might use that term to say I'm depressed, for some black people they don't use it. Does that make sense? So sometimes you have to be culturally attuned to be listening for these expressions. And then you have to engage them. Help me to better understand how, you are feeling stressed. And when you start to they start to elaborate more, then the picture begins to emerge. Because depression, and then if they're saying if it's just constantly, if they are constantly saying it, he says, can the expression feeling under the weather? But if it is a constant thing, we got to explore what that is, because you're gonna see depression is not only expressed in language unique to black and brown, but there are somatic symptoms that black and brown people go through that will indicate that they are depressed. Does that make sense, everybody? All right. So what we are saying, if clinicians are not culturally trained to listen out for these expressions, before my wife goes on, I give you one example. I saw a young lady. She's a minister in her Sunday church. She's a real estate individual. She's going through a divorce. Plus, she's contemplating going back into school. And she went to her physician. The physician did the evaluation, says he can't find anything cognitively wrong, medically wrong. So it's the physician who is referring her to a therapist. When I did the diagnostic evaluation with her, she says, Mr. Brown, I am not naturally an irritable person, but I find myself just being constantly, at times, irritable. Right? I understood that one of the ways how black people express that they are depressed is through irritability. And I was able to say to her, my dear, being a minister, running this group, doing real estate, going through a divorce, contemplating, you have 2 young adults. Have you ever stopped to consider how overwhelming all these things are? And it can be an indication that it's coming out in an irritable manner. And I could literally see when she paused for about 30 seconds. You know what happened? A light bulb went off in her head. It started to make sense because she wasn't linking irritability to depression. That psychoeducation did a lot for her.
To piggyback off of that, a lot of times this irritability impacts us because we will be considered the angry black person in at the workplace. For example, we had a client who, when he first came in, he had lost his job. He's in the medical field. He's going through a divorce. His father had passed away. And what happened, he was asking them for some time off. And if any of you are nurses or whatever, you know how hard that is to get sometimes. And so he went to them, asked them for the time off. They refused him the time off. He went to work. A patient went after him. What do you think he did? He reacted. He went back after the patient. So he ended up losing his job. And at that point, he's coming to us because kids were complaining that, he was too harsh with them. There were a lot of other things that were going on. And so people were saying, you need to get some help. So he came to us, and as we were working with him, of course, he was going through a legal situation because, of course, you attacked a patient. Patient came at you, but you reacted. So we helped him with crafting a letter to express and to help them understand, how us as black folks experience depression, and to make that case for it. To cut a long story short, that letter helped him to establish that depression diagnosis. This was a big case, so I'm not going to give you guys any specific. He won his case, and he ended up getting paid by the hospital because he sued them. They should have given him the time off because he needed it. And we were able to help him establish that case for depression. It was just recently, and people don't understand how important seeking mental health care is. Our white counterparts, they get it. If something happens to them, they are seeking mental health professional. And this is my client. I'm working with this young man. He was going through about a depression for about a year. He stopped paying he had perfect credit before. Going through a lot of things. Of course, he again was going through a divorce. Stopped paying his bills. Like certain things were on automatic, like his rent and stuff. He was showing up to work, but he just wasn't paying credit card bills. Before that, immaculate credit history. He works, he gets paid. But anything that took a little bit more effort that he has to pay and he has to put effort into it, he just stopped doing it. So, of course, the credit card company came after him. All right, so I worked with him, and at first he said, Shelly, and I don't think it's going to work. I'm like, okay, this is what depression is, and I'm explaining to him. And I said, let's make a case. Of course, he didn't get a lawyer to go to court. So I gave him the letter, and I said, hey, show the letter thing there. He said, do you think I can call the credit card company before going to court? I said, try that, but send them the letter. Do you know they took off all the interest. They gave him 1 year, no interest to pay. He still had to go to court the next day, but they were not requesting him to pay. He owed, with interest, it was like $9,000 something. And they took off all the interest and just let him pay what he owed, and they gave him a payment plan. Because we were able to help him establish that mental health diagnosis. But I think sometimes people think, if I go see a therapist, it's going to be a bad thing. It's going to have consequences for me. But in this case, if they're true diagnosed and you can help them establish that case, there are benefits to actually really getting help from seeking mental health care.
All right. Is the information being helpful so far, saints? All right. So let's run through these other symptoms: self-criticism, inability to fall asleep or stay asleep. All right. These are some of the classic symptoms: eating more, eating too little, dissociating, having thoughts of death, thoughts of not being good enough, feelings of not doing enough, irritability and restlessness, feelings of worthlessness and excessive guilt, sexual dysfunction, low libido, relationship difficulties. All right? Let's do that very quickly. So, when you're working with individuals, the questions that we want to ask is, instead of asking them, do you feel depressed? We may want to ask them, are you tired, in a way that sleep doesn't fix? Right? Because remember, for black and brown people, they don't tend to use on a significant level the clinical term depression. But so you're not going to, if they say, if you say to them, are you depressed? They might say no. But if you ask them this other question, hey, are you feeling tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix? That might give you far more information that can lead you to conclude that they might be struggling with depression. All right, let's move on. Go.
One of the other thing you will see in the black and brown community is that depression shows up in more somatic ways as well. So depression presents in the body rather than through emotional disclosure. So instead of us telling you, we're seeing it. So what you see is that a lot of these clients that we also get, sometimes they have this frequent emergency room visit. They're constantly going to the emergency room because they're having all these headaches. They're having all these different pain, and it's unexplainable. They will go to the emergency room. Then the emergency room sends them to see their primary care physician. And there's nothing. No one can establish anything wrong with them. And after multiple visits, the primary care physician will say, hey, you got to see a therapist. Because a lot of these somatic symptoms have no bearing in like a medical, it's more mental health. So again, you might see the headaches, body pain, fatigue, sleep disturbance, irritability, even high blood pressure. That's a medical condition. However, it is sustained by a mental health issue.
And by the way, saints, I would say what percentage? I would think about 25 to 30% of the clients that we see in our practice, they come to us for marital counseling. All right? Now, if people are having problems in their marriage, right, what sometimes would happen? What you would see what? Sometimes when you're talking to some people, they will say, listen, I feel like a knot in my stomach. Or their blood pressure will go up. Or their anxiety will increase. Why? Because they are having a ongoing marital issue. Now, if you are able to work with them in going, in navigating, in improving their communication, improving their relationship, improving their marriage, what you think likely is going to happen to the headache? The high blood pressure, and all of these things. Listen, they will begin to go away because these were not medical, but these are more somatic symptoms that are being driven by a mental health concern. All right? So sometimes when individuals come and they come with these medical concerns, because we are not prescribers of medication, that falls outside our scope of expertise, we would ask them, hey, did you see your healthcare professional about these? And then they will say, it's the doctor who is referring, because they say, I just cannot find any medical thing. But this thing seems to be connected to a psychological thing. By the way, Ellen White is very clear. 90% of the diseases from which men suffer has their origin where? In the mind. I can stand here and lecture a person to death about exercise, about diet. Some people will get that and they will run with it. But what about a person whose obesity is connected to a mental health condition? What about a person who might be using food as a coping mechanism? Then what you have to do, lecturing them to that might not help them. You have to bring them into a safe, confidential space to unpack that and empower them. The exercise will come, the nutrition will come, but you have to address that mental health issue first. Does that make sense, ladies and gentlemen? All right. So what we are trying to say is that in the black and brown community, there are times when depression is communicated through a certain language. And there are times when somatic symptoms can indicate that a person is also depressed. If that's clear, say amen. All right, let's, okay, this was one of the things that somebody mentioned, so we're not going to dwell too long on it. This is how depression can be masked by these terms. We got to be strong. You got to be strong. Don't let them see you cry. We survived slavery, so we can survive this. While these are good nuggets to keep us motivated, what we don't want to do, if we find that we are in distress, we need to seek some form of help. Does that make sense, everybody? All right. Then let's move on, because I want to share, this is important. Spirituality, read with me, ladies and gentlemen, is genuinely what? Protective. Church community, as the sister was pointing out down there, provides social support, meaning making, and resilience. Research consistently shows that faith can buffer against psychological distress. You look into the scientific literature, it is very clear. People who pray, people who are connected to God in their relationship, they heal faster. So there is a place in therapy for the spiritual side, right? Okay, but here's the other thing that you don't want. However, when spiritual framing delays clinical intervention, or when individuals feel their depression is evidence of personal spiritual failure, then that's the time when religion can become a what, ladies and gentlemen? A barrier. Does that make sense? All right. We want to wrap it up now, because by the way, let me do this. I want to show you something. I'm going to bring you back to Malik's case. This is where my sister was relating a case, but I want to bring you back. I want to show you something. This is the DSM, the diagnostic manual. This is like the Bible for a therapist. So I want you to notice, my wife is going to walk you through this quickly, and then we go back to the case study. I want you to notice what they say clinicians need to look for in the diagnostic manual to indicate when a person is depressed, versus how some people in their culture express depression that is not chronicled in the diagnostic manual.
Okay, so there are these 5 different domains that we're looking at, right? And the DSM is saying that we should look for sadness and tearfulness in people with depression. But if you hop over to the black and brown community, what that's going to look like is irritability, anger, and sometimes emotional flatness, nothing, right? But that's not in the DSM. So if we're just going by what the DSM says, only for black and brown people, they're not going to meet that criteria. Not everyone. And then behavioral changes, where they're saying, hey, look for withdrawal and social isolation. Those are typical symptoms, right? However, in the black and brown community, you might see overworking or compulsive business. This is completely different from what they tell us depressed people should do. Depressed people should lie in bed. They shouldn't want to do anything. It should look like what the sister here talked about, not showering or not anything like that. But a lot of times in the black and brown community, you might see it in overworking. They are working more than they should. And then energy level, it should be low energy, fatigue. In the black and brown community, it's just going to be expressed as I'm just tired. It's going to attribute to work stress and not depression. When you look at cognition, DSM says look for hopelessness and worthlessness. However, when you're talking to the black and brown community, a lot of times you're seeing them framing it as they're going through a spiritual crisis or feeling abandoned by God. There's nowhere in the DSM to look for that language. You're just looking for hopelessness. All right? And then when you look at the physical part of it, they're experiencing psychomotor changes. When you think about psychomotor changes, depressed people usually move a little slower. Their speech is slower. There's a lot of slow down of that person. But in the black and brown community, again, you're going to see it manifesting as headaches, body pain, gastrointestinal symptoms, leading to frequent hospital emergency room visit. I see a hand. Yes, it's used to diagnose mental disorders. Mhm. So that's the thing. It is not, when you look at it, let's take like the spiritual framing, right? Where they're talking about their spiritual crisis or feeling abandoned by God. There's a sense of hopelessness that's under it. But if you don't have the cultural lens to kind of dig a little deeper, you're only going to see this person as crazy, right? For example, I was where I before going into private practice, I worked with predominantly adolescents who engage in like they've attempted suicide or engaging in self harm. And we had this one young lady in the program who she had attempted suicide, and so she was hospitalized. And she came to us, um, and she would read her Bible constantly at school, right? So during the lunch break, she would read her Bible. For her, a lot of the staff in that program, I was the only person of color. So the staff started talking about her as like she's crazy. But for her, there was this deep sense of she was using that spirituality to really deal with the sadness, all of what was going on. So for me, I know that this is a black kid coming from a Christian home. What else is going on? This girl is struggling with her sexuality. That is what is underneath that. So reading the Bible constantly, that is what's going on for her. And if you don't have that lens to dig a little deeper, you're going to see something else. So that's where the misdiagnosis comes in. Because your judgment is colored already. The only reason a person could be reading their Bible constantly like a kid is something else must be going on. It's a psychological issue. Yes, it is. However, what else? What's driving it? She's struggling with her sexuality. And we're able to work through that. And even the sexuality piece to me was easy because she she was looking at, girls, and she's a girl looking at girls, and she started thinking they were cute, they looked good, they were sexy, and she's thinking, oh, I must be gay. Couple that with your religious belief, and I was able to kind of help her through that. Problem solved.
Right. So even and in addition to what my wife is saying, even though you have these extra expression, it's still leading to depression. So it doesn't take away from the diagnosis of depression. So what we are trying to do is to provide education to say, okay, look for these cultural ways because it doesn't take away from they're still going to lead to the diagnosis of depression. All right. The other thing too is right now in the mental health field, there is serious discussions going on among mental health practitioners regarding how to make contribution as it relates to therapeutic treatment and modalities and delivery for black and brown community. Because you got to remember, most of the treatment modalities weren't developed for black people. They were primarily developed for white people. And so right now there is serious discussion going on as to how blacks, Hispanics can make that kind of contribution where modalities now will become culturally developed and culturally delivered. So in addition to what you were asking, that's something that is going on in the field. So who to tell? You might see later down in the DSM where they start to add these things to say for individuals in this culture, you need to look out for these expressions, right? I don't know if we answered your question. Okay. Right. Sure, sure, sure. Right. Sure. And I don't know, perhaps you weren't here earlier, but that's one of the things that we have been stressing as well as to why we are trying, from our perspective, right now we have 44 clinicians in our mental health practice that my wife and I operate. And most of them are black and brown. And the reason we are trying to develop clinicians to put out there is to be able to deliver this cultural relevant therapy, because there are some things that in any profession where you might get the theory, but then you have to draw on all the theory along with the practical experience of the person before you to deliver effective therapy. All right? All right, so let's close off, ladies and gentlemen, with the case study with Malik, because we want to bring it home. We just want to make sure that you capture what we are trying to say. And then we close off here, turn it over. All right, my wife is going to read this, and then we close off.
So Malik is referred for being disrespectful, easily frustrated, and aggressive at recess. His teacher reports incomplete work and frequent stomach aches. At home, he has stopped enjoying basketball, wants to stay in his room, and is not himself. His family recently faced some housing instability. His mother works nights, and he has experienced racial bullying at school.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, based on all the things that we have been saying here now for over an hour, come on, talk to me as you look at this case study. What are some of the things in the case study that indicate that Malik might be going through something? Talk to me. I want to hear you. I don't want to hear a chorus. I want to hear you. Talk to me. Aggressive, disrespectful. What else? What's now? He stopped. He used to love what? Basketball. But what happened? He has lost enjoyment in that. So we are looking at that. What else? Isolating himself. Isolating himself. What else? Come on, talk to me. What else? Huh? Bullying. There you go. He's been bullied at school. Right? If you have an 8-year-old being bullied at school, what's going to happen there? Right? So why we started out by letting you know that therapy cannot be done in isolation. It has to be done in a corroborative work. What now the therapist has to do? We got to start work with who? The school. To do what? To address the bullying. We have to address the bullying. Does that make sense? You remember the lady says the 11-year-old, why he wasn't eating was because he was what? Being bullied. Does that make sense? All right, what else? What else that might indicate? Mom's is now working at night. So he's not feeling that motherly presence. You see, what about the somatic symptom? He start to now have what? Stomach ache. Does that make sense? Now, let me ask you this question. What was he referred to therapy for? What was he referred for? For being what? For being what? And for being what? Easy and what? So what if the wrong clinician, what if the clinician who received Malik was only focusing on him being aggressive? What that clinician will be doing what? Only behavioral modification. And all of these other things would be what? Would be missed. And that is why there has to be cultural competence in terms of handling black and brown kids. Does that make sense, ladies and gentlemen?
What?
Huh? And sometimes, sometimes we're not saying all white therapists are incompetent now, because there are times when they would have gotten that cultural training. Because we have white clinicians in our practice, but guess what happens? We have two white clinicians who are married to, black. So they get exposed to the black culture. I feel very comfortable referring black people to them because they have that kind of black exposure and awareness, right? But that's important to have. Cultural sensitivity is very, very important to have. All right?
One of the things that I want to point out, if you look at the case again, you have the wrong therapist. What is something that's jumping out at you that says safety, safety, safety? Anything? Huh? No. Look at it. Malik's mother works nights. So if the wrong person gets this, and Malik, there is just a situation where, sometimes in black communities, families are trying to get by, and they might say to a neighbor, hey, Malik is in the house, give an eye, right? And they're trying their best. I'm not saying this is something that should happen. It shouldn't happen because Malik is 8, and the law says Malik cannot stay by himself, right? But if the wrong therapist gets this, all they focus on, the whole depression is not even taken care of anymore, because the major thing is, let me call CPS, let me do this, let me do that, and there's no work done with the family to explore what else can be done. So oftentimes, like if this comes to us, of course, if the family wants to do nothing to address this, we're mandated reporters. We have to report it. However, before you get to that place, you're educating this person. Hey, what other resources do you have? Can you pull in? Because you don't want to disrupt this family further. Because guess what? If you call CPS in and the mom has no resource, a lot of times it's not even that CPS is trying to get anybody. But there are a lot of other things that can be discovered in the midst of that could put this family further at risk, when you could have easily kind of addressed it and helped the family to brainstorm, fix that problem, and you're able to work on the depression.
Yeah. Just this past Friday, my wife and I, we had to sit with somebody from one of the insurance company. And you know what they were about I don't know what's going on here, but somebody's phone. And we had to sit with somebody from one of the insurance company, particularly for two of our clients. And you know what they are trying to assess? What extra help, along with therapy, can be provided to these other individuals. Therapy, you will hear me say it again, cannot be rendered in isolation. So right here, if we are working with Malik, what we are trying to do is to make sure we try to get moms some support as well. Does that make sense? And let me just put a pin here. When it comes on to providing therapy, it's not just the person sitting before you. It has to be also how you are paneled with the insurance. Right now, we are paneled with all the insurances in New York. We made that determination to make sure we are paneled with. If we are not on an insurance panel in New York, you know why we are not on it? It's because that panel has closed. You know why? We don't want, when somebody comes to us for therapy, we have to send them away because we don't accept their insurance. That's one thing. Another thing, also, we find that a lot of our black and brown people tend to use certain insurances. So you know what we do? We make sure we are on those insurance panel so that wouldn't become a barrier for them getting treatment. We also work with nurse practitioners and psychiatrists. And there are times when we have to be, because there are times when people come to us, they need some medication to stabilize. Sometimes they need it. They are so anxious. Risky behavior. They might need some medication to stabilize. So this is where we have to work with like a nurse practitioner, a psychiatrist. But there are times when we are referring them to these individuals. Get what happened? They might not have the insurance. So what we have to do, sometimes we have to be working with them to make sure that they get on the insurance panel. You see what I'm saying? So it is a corroborative work, ladies and gentlemen. It's not just a work in isolation. And there is this, I'm going to leave you because I see that the time is, okay, all right, okay. For the church, make sure you normalize therapy from your church. Also, don't preach that depression is a sin. Train health leaders. make referral pathways, host psychoeducation seminars, and partner with clinicians. Once we can get that, people will now become more comfortable to seek the mental health treatment. All right? Thank you so very much. Hopefully, the information was very helpful.
Good evening, everyone. On behalf of our resident pastor, Jude Francis, the Brooklyn Faith, Health Ministry Department, the AY Department, I would like to express our heartfelt thanks and appreciation to Pastor Deebo Brown and Sister Shelly Ann Brown. First and foremost, we thank God for his guidance and abundant blessings throughout this past day. We are reminded from the sermon this morning that our bodies are truly a sermon, a temple where the Holy Spirit dwells. We sincerely thank Pastor Deebo Brown and Sister Shelly Ann Brown for their valuable insight and practical information on how depression is manifested in the Black and brown communities. Our appreciation also goes to our health leader, Sister Nicole Ashby Williams, and the team for their planning, support, and commitment to making this program impactful. To Joshua Stobie and the AY team, we thank you. The communication department, Brother Wint and the communication department, Sister Prendergast and the hospitality department, the Pathfinders, and the adventurers who led out in the march. We thank them also. And special thanks to Dr. Camille Rodney. We can't forget about Sister Arlene. She did a lot of advertisement for us. We thank them all. Also, we can't forget about you, our audience present here, or online viewers or visitors, and all present here. We thank you for your active participation. Your contribution made this program a great success. As we leave, may we be reminded that depression is not manifested the same in every group or in every community. And only 35% of African Americans seek mental health care. Let us all take charge of our mental health. Thank you all, and may God continue to bless as we leave here. Our closing song is 56, The Day Thou Gavest, The Day Thou Gavest, the first and the last. And then Sister McLeod would close in prayers. 56. I don't have the words.
I don't know the songs.
each continent and island, the dawn leads on another day. The voice of prayer is never silent, nor die the strains of praise away. So be it, Lord, thy throne shall never, like earth's proud empires, pass away. Thy kingdom stands and grows forever, till all thy creatures own thy sway.
Let us pray.
Sorry, 1 second. I apologize, but we didn't get a chance to pick up our offering before we for AY. So if I may have the assistance of Amir and Joshua to pick up our offering. And while they pick up our offering, Eden. Can assist. We do apologize.
Give it to you.
Oh, give thanks unto the Lord, for he is good. Yes, he is good. Oh, give thanks unto the Lord, for he is good. Yes, he is good, for he is worthy, worthy, for he is good. Yes, he is good, for he is worthy, worthy, for he is good. Yes, he is good. Oh, give thanks. Oh, give thanks unto the Lord, for he is good. Yes, he is good. Oh, give thanks unto the Lord, for he is good. Yes, he is good, for he is worthy, worthy, for he is good. Yes, he is good, for he is worthy, worthy, for he is good. Yes, he is good. Amen.
Loving Father, let us pray. Loving Father, we thank you for a well-spent day. We thank you for the presenters. We thank you for the hearers. We thank you for your Sabbath day, Lord, a day of rest and a day of learning. We have learned so much today. I pray that as we go this week, we will remember that there may be somebody who could be helped by the information we have received this evening. Father, we pray that you will touch the presenters. We pray that you will continue to keep their minds clear and focused as they try to help the populations, especially our populations. I continue to give them wisdom, Lord, and increase their knowledge and understanding. Bless their families, Lord. I pray that you will take them home safely. It seemed to be a rainy evening. I pray that you will take them home safely. And Lord, be with us this week, creating us clean hearts and renew our minds, renew a right spirit within us. I pray in Jesus' precious name. Bless the offering, dear Lord. Bless those who gave and those who did not have to give. I pray they too may have a blessing so that they may also be able to share in the future. Amen.